And good day, everyone. My name is Jojo Axel, and today I'll be talking about Lab 1 of SCP-1103, which is C programming. Alongside me today is Sing, which is my partner for today's lab. There are a total of 4 questions, and each question needs to have a pseudocode and a flowchart for the following problems. I'll be explaining on question 1 and question 2, while Sing will be explaining on the rest, which is 3 and 4. For question 1, write a payroll program that computes an employee's gross pay and net pay. An employee who works more than 40 hours per week should be paid at overtime rate, which is 1.5 of the regular rate, for all hours over 40 hours. Next, we need to compute net pay by deducting 10% of the gross pay only if an employee earns more than 1,500 ringgit. So with those circumstances, we'll be moving on to the flowchart and the pseudocode. Now let's start off with the pseudocode, but before that we need to identify the input and output. Input being normal pay for 1 working hour and working hours per week. The output being gross pay per week and net pay per week. Now we will be getting started with the pseudocode. Starting off with the start process, and number 2 and number 3 steps will be getting the input variables, which is normal pay for 1 working hour and as well as working hours of the employee, let's say P and H. Step number 4 is the itinerary number, which will later be clearly shown in the flowchart. And number 5, which is the gross pay per month. Now, step number 6 is the while loop, which is under a condition of n is less than 4 or equal to 4. We will have an if condition, which is if h is equal or less than 40, calculate gross pay per month using g equals to g plus h multiplied by p. If it's more than 40, calculate the gross pay with g equals to g plus 40p plus h minus 40 multiplied by 1.5 and p. After that, we end this if loop and display the gross pay per month. Next is the final condition, which is if the gross pay is greater than 1,500. If is meets the condition, then calculate the net pay per month, which is n equals to 0.9, which is 90% of our gross pay. After this, we will be ending the if condition right here, and also ending the while loop that we started just now, and displaying net pay per month, ending the pseudocode right here. Moving on to the flowchart. Same as the pseudocode, we need a starting process, and as well as getting variables of our input, which is P and H, stated right here, is our normal pay for 1 working hour and working hours of the employee. Now, moving on to I equals to 1, which is the itinerary number, and the gross pay per month. For the next step, which is a decision, which is a decision or condition. If I equals or less than 4, if I is equal or less than 4, H will go into another condition, which is H is higher than 40 or not. Just like the previous pseudocode, we'll be using these two formulas. If it is true, then we'll be using G equals to HP, while if it's not, then we'll be using G equals to 40P plus H minus 40 multiplied by 1.5 and P. After this, we'll be printing out the gross pay per month, which is G. Next is another condition, which is the final condition, being if the gross pay is higher than 1,500 or not. If it is, then we'll multiply it by 0.9. If it's not, we'll just go straight down and back upwards until we reach I equals to more than 4. After reaching I equals to more than 4, we'll be displaying net pay per month of the employee and ending the flowchart right here. Now this is question 1 done. Now let's move on to question 2. Question 2, the National Earthquake Information Center has asked us to write a program implementing the decision table shown in Table 1 to characterize an earthquake based on the Richter scale number, and our program should read the Richter number N and display an appropriate message. For this question, we have a total of 5 conditions and 5 outputs that we need to display. Now, starting off with the pseudocode again, we need to get the input and outputs first, which is the Richter number as the input and the characterization as the output. And for every pseudocode, we need to start off with the start process, which is our step 1 right here. And step 2, getting our inputs, which is the Richter number. Step 3 is a condition, which is if n, our Richter number, is smaller than 5.0. Then we'll display an output of little or number 4 is an else condition, which if it's not n smaller than 5.0, then it will be equal to these types of conditions. Now starting off with the first one is if n is smaller than 5.5, then we'll be displaying moderate damage. Else if n is smaller than 6.5, then display serious damage. Else if n is smaller than 7.5, display a disaster. Else if n is higher or equal to 7.5, display catastrophic damage. And these are all the 5 characterizations stated, and we'll be ending the if process, and as well as the pseudocode right here. Now starting off with the flowchart again, as I stated before, we have 5 conditions. But first, we need to start off from the basics, which is the starting process and getting the input. Now reaching the conditions, if n is smaller than 5.0 or not. If it is, then print little or no damage. If n is smaller than 5.5, then yes, print yes, moderate damage. And if n is smaller than 6.5, print serious damage. If n is smaller than 7.5, print disaster. And the last one is n is higher or equal to 7.5. Then printing catastrophic damage, ending the flowchart right here. Now I'll pass it on to my partner, Jongxing.
The question wants us to write a program that finds the equivalent series and parallel resistance for a collection of register value. Let's look at the pseudocode. The input of this program is supposed to be number of register and resistance of each registers, and the output will be the series sum and parallel sum. At the program start, the system will get the number of register, which is n, and resistance of each register, which is r. Initially, the series sum rs and parallel sum rp will be the 0, and the I as a iterary number, which is 1. After this, we'll come to the while loop. In while loop, the calculation will perform, which is rs equal to rs plus ri, and rp equal to rp plus 1 over ri. For example, initially the I is equal to 0, then the calculation will become Rs equal to Rs plus R1, and the initial Rs is 0, so Rs is equal to R1, and also Rp will become 1 over R1. After this, I will become 2 and start the next loops. When the I is equal to n, the while loop is n. After while loop, Rp is equal to 1 over Rp is calculated. And then at the last, Rs and Rp will display as the output and the program will end. Let's go to the flowchart part. As almost similar with pseudocode part, the program start, system will get n and also r, and initially Rs equal to 0 and Rp equal to 0 and I equal to 1. It will perform a while loop and then get the output as Rs and Rp, and the program end. Without further ado, let's look at the question 4. The question 4 wants us to write a program to process a collection of saving account transaction, which is deposit or withdrawal. In our pseudocode, the input supposed to be previous account balance and value enter, and the output of this program will be transaction type, which is withdrawal or deposit, and also new account balance. After the program started, the system will read previous account balance, which is B1, and value enter, which is V. For enter value, if the value is positive, that means it is a deposit, while it's negative, that means it is a withdrawal. Let's go for the first while loops. When V is not equal to 0, we will go to perform a if-else loops. In if-else loops, if V greater than 0, calculation performance, which is B2 equal to B1 plus V, and deposit and B2 value will be printed. Else, another calculation will perform, which is B2 equal to B1 plus V. Then it will go to the another if-else loops. If B2 smaller than 0, error message will printed. If else B2 equal to B1, the error message also will be printed. Else, the system will print withdrawal and also B2 value. After this, the second if-else loop will be end, and the first if-else loop will also be end. At the same time, the first while loops will be end at the step 5, and the program will done. In our flowchart, is almost similar with the pseudocode. The program start, B1 and V value will be read, and go to our while loop, then go to first if else loops and second if else loops, and the output supposed to be the transaction type, which is deposit, withdrawal or error, and the value of new balance, which is B2, will be printed.